Doc Slab Audio on music production and audio engineering. Welcome to Doc Slab and our fourth Master Series. I do believe this is the second video in our fourth Master Series dealing with sonic balance and sonic clarity. And in this video, we are going to talk about the first place that we have to address our sonic balance and our sonic clarity. That is when we're composing, creating, and arranging our compositions and creations. So basically, I'm not going to get into a whole lot of technical things here musically as far as written music, but I do have the written music out here to try to show some things. It's a pretty simple concept, so I'm going to really quickly go through this because the concepts aren't that hard to understand. Sometimes it's just better to get somebody to tell it to you and point it out, and sometimes it seems like, well, that's obvious, but I hadn't thought about that, bro. So we're just going to kind of talk about that a little bit. And if you're audio engineers, this can help you with your productions or the people you're working with to help point things out when they're having problems with their sonic balance and sonic clarity because of over orchestration, things laying on top of each other, on and on and on. You'll be a much better informed audio engineer to help when you can if you're not in dealing with the composition, the arrangement, and the production phase of it. But it can make you a much better audio engineer by being that much more informed of this stage. So the first thing we want to talk about is that whenever we're dealing with this is that sometimes we're not looking for that sonic balance. There are times that we want washes in the background that are like ambience, in the background behind something that's clearer out front. Or we have things that are happening that what's going on behind, say, like the main vocalist, you don't want so distinct or so clear so that it takes the focus off what's out front. There are times that happens. That's not to say that I always say that's what you should do, because I like to really lean more towards sonic balance and sonic clarity of everything that's happening. But sometimes that's better. Sometimes it's an effect, or sometimes it's a technique that we use for a certain phase or a transition or a break or something, who knows? It is, a viable option. Does that make sense? And there's also times that we meld things to where we may not be so worried about the sonic balance. We want things to be a little unbalanced for a transition or a break or a movement to try to do a little thing that's a little bit different. Or we're blending things that we have, like a oboe, a sax, a trombone, and some instrument from Africa that are going ding da dum bum ba da do pop, that has this really strange effect, that it's more of a sound sculpting thing, and we might not want it completely balanced in the spectrum for the effect that it's having. We might want to have it, unbalanced here or there for a moment for an effect that's happening, try to help things move forward, or a creative thought that might be happening inside of you. So that can happen. So whether or not you're the producer, composer, arranger, or audio engineer, you have to take those things into consideration, that those things might be an option or might be what's happening that you don't want to mess with as an engineer. So there are things you have to consider whenever we're talking about sonic balance. But when we get into the basic sonic balance, there's a couple things that we're dealing with. The first thing that we're dealing with is a very obvious thing whenever we're composing and arranging, is that we have different octave ranges. So like in here, I've got this harmonic happening way above this open string on this guitar in this composition. They may not need to be separated in the stereo field to still maintain a lot of their clarity and sonic balance as individualities because of how distinctly different they are. You may want to separate them a little bit, or you may not be worried about it. So it's the first place that whenever we're dealing with different octave ranges, that sometimes we don't have to separate them so much in the stereo field, but they're being considered, as we create and we compose and we arrange what's going to be happening to them later on. And then we come into the next logical thing is whenever we're dealing with cordial structures, we're dealing with a fundamental, a harmony, a triad. Then we start getting into 3 or 4 or more as complex chords. How much separation do they need? And what's going to be happening? Where they're going to be? Sometimes they're with different instruments that are going to be very distinct by themselves, and you don't have to worry about separating them too much because they're very distinct unto themselves. They're in different octave ranges, more than maybe or maybe not. So you have to consider that, whether or not they're in the same octave range or a different octave range, whether or not you're going to need to separate them some in the stereo field. And those are the first things we need to consider when we're composing and arranging. So, the next logical thought after we've talked about that a little bit is forward thinking. The more we think about the end product from the beginning product, the better chance we're going to have a better product. So at each moment in time, we're thinking about what's going on there. Where is that in the arrangement, in the composition? What is working with it? Where is it going to have to be in the stereo field? Where is it in the spectral realm in relation to anything working with it down the line? You might have 10 different instruments here, right here. What's happening at that moment in time? What needs to be separated in the spectrum? What it needs to be in different octave ranges? What needs to be put somewhere else in the stereo field? It's a really good idea to make notes about this while you're composing and arranging in your doing your production to have really good control of your sonic balance. So with that in mind, we're trying to really focus on taking every moment in time while we're dealing with our sonic balance and sonic clarity. And when we're not, we're trying to step away from that sonic balance and sonic clarity for some type of effect, that it's very premeditated, so that every moment in time as we go through building these things, that everything is way more premeditated and thought out about what the end product will be, so that our project will come out that much better. The next logical thing that we come to is actual sonic balance that's going to help give us sonic clarity. And that is achieving a sonic balance. So whenever the first logical one to look at is a full spectrum. So you have a really deep low end to a really high end, and everything in between. You've got a really full spectrum of things going on. So you're really trying to figure out where things are sitting, not only in the arrangement, but where they're going to be later in the stereo field, in the spectral realm. Where are they at? Where are they going to have to be as a finished product, so you have good spectral balance and good stereo field balance, and maintaining as much clarity in those areas in a finished product. And that can also be when you're dealing with things that are just mids and highs, or mids and lows, or lows and highs, or things like that, trying to balance that somehow. Where is the balance at? Make everything as premeditated as possible, thinking about what you're doing there, how you're balancing it. So that even a very simple concept that thought out really well, I've got a drum set, so I've put it somewhere in the middle, the kick drum's in the center, and it's got the hi-hat and snare off a little bit. It's a real simple example. I've got the bass over to the right and the guitar off to the left, and and also over to the right I have a keyboard playing the lower spectrum that's fairly same spectral range as the bass, and over in the guitar there's a sax that's somewhere in the same spectral range. So while they're playing, I've got pretty good balance there. I'm not letting everything speak at the same time, so that it helps maintain clarity. And also, when the bass is over there speaking, when it's not speaking, I'm letting the keyboard speak a little bit, because they're in the same spectral range, but panned off to the side so they don't mud each other. And over the guitar, well, I'll let the guitar speak a little bit, then I'll let the sax speak a little bit, because they're in the same spectral range. So I starting to get this sonic balance happening. Does that make sense? And sometimes things are speaking by themselves. Even something like that, very short moments of time, like you can look in this guitar composition I'm putting together. Here, you've got a whole measure that the drums are just speaking with the guitar that's up above. And then the bass is speaking for a moment. They're having their own moments in time, so that it is taking spectral balance and it's taking sonic balance in consideration. But when they're spread out more, that it doesn't seem like that as much, but they are being utilized. I am using the drums, I am using the bass, and maybe I'll have the keyboard over here, but they're spread out away from each other so that they maintain their clarity. But there's still a sonic balance there. Low end, kick end, or a hi-hats or whatever going on, low bass, then going into a keyboard here, that they're all getting some time, but they're being separated to help maintain their clarity. And you can break that into smaller and smaller moments. Like here through one measure, I might have a quarter of that measure the guitar is speaking, a quarter of that measure the bass speaking, a quarter of the measure the keyboard speaking, a quarter of the measure the drums going. And you can break that into smaller moments to where you got, the guitar, bass, doing all kinds of stuff. And also you got stereo field that you can blend them, that balance the sonic, like the low bass and the higher mid-range saxophone playing at the same time, and then they both give way to the keyboard over here and the guitar. There's multiple ways of separating it with the stereo field and the spectral field, and also with octave ranges, because you also have this area to where you can deal with it with the octave ranges, to where sometimes you can let the bass over there play with the keyboard that are in different octave ranges. They're very distinct from themselves, and maybe with a little bit of separation of stereo field, that they maintain a lot of their own sonic clarity and help the sonic balance, so that you have a nice balance no matter what's going on at that moment in your production. You take that sonic balance, balancing the frequency range, and then balancing the instruments in their octave ranges, and then balancing what they're doing. Does that make sense? Who's speaking at what time? Sometimes just letting something speak while something else isn't really helps. You'd be surprised that you got a little bit of drum, then a little bit of guitar, then a little bit of bass, then a little bit of keyboards, and you haven't panned them anywhere. They're all stereo. Does that make sense? And you just them all having little moments that they're not laying on top of each other, but they're all heard. That way you're not throwing away spectral content and not utilizing those instruments, but you still hear a sonic balance, and they help maintain their clarity, but not laying on top of each other. And when they do, you have different octave ranges, and you have some stereo field that you can pan them off while you're working on your sonic balance and maintaining your sonic clarity. So it gets a little bit complicated, but the issue is fairly simple. The more you think about it, the more you contemplate every moment in time. Every step is another moment in time. It's more premeditated, to where when this bass note hits, you're really thinking about anything else that is happening with it. Where's its octave range? What is it working with? Is it working as a harmony to something else in a cordial structure? Is it by itself? Where's it at in this in the sonic balance, as far as, is there a low end working with it or a higher end working with it? You got to pan it off somewhere. Is it going to go and be over on the right hand side with a higher end saxophone player while it plays the lower end, or playing against a tom thing over on the other side, pom pom, that's playing with the guitar? What's happening there at every single moment of time, so you maintain as much sonic balance and sonic clarity of those individualities as possible. With that being said, that we've already talked about, sometimes we step away from it a little bit to get blends, but you'd be amazed that if you take this premeditated approach, that through the whole production, everything is going to come out sounding better. And in the end, when you as audio engineers make things bigger and live is clearer and sounding better than live, that it's going to have that much more importance, because then when you go work on that bass, that it's not just some droning sound in the background that's holding the lower end that's working with the drums, that it's very distinct and clear. Now, I mean, a prime example of that, I've got a bass. Sometimes I might have a lower end bass working with a kick drum. Does that make sense? So I want that bass and that kick drum clear, so I've got one of them panned over to one side or the other for a moment so that they have that clarity. We're maybe working with some other stuff that's coming in the stereo field a little bit, that's a keyboard and a guitar over there or something. Does that make sense? But they're very distinct, and sometimes you want to blend them. You either bring that kick drum and bass in closer together, and they're more of a fused sound that has a sound scope that sound that they're working more together. You know, I mean, maybe even EDM kind of thing. And sometimes they're really close together, but different octave ranges. You got the kick drum hitting right there, and that bass note would normally be pretty low, but you've got them fairly centered, but you've brought it up an octave. So it's playing higher up in the octave, so you can hear that they're both fairly centered, but you can hear the bass fairly clear because its spectral content is much higher than that lower kick drum. And with proper filtering and, you know, that kind of thing, that you can hear them pretty clear. You can hear the bass going thump, 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 you know, up higher, say like an E that's an octave up instead of an open E down way low, and the kick drum, bump, 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 you know, and the think, thunk, thunk of the bass, that they're both very distinct because you've taken it into consideration where they're at in the spectral field, what you can lay on top of each other close, when you got to separate them in the stereo field. It's been premeditated so that as you're composing and arranging in your production, that it's very much considered. And you as an audio engineer will be able to hear these things and go, hey, well, you know, if you did that a little bit differently, I can get a lot more sonic balance and sonic clarity in your production, because what you're doing is muddying things when we can clean it up and everything will be clear. Does that make sense? And know what you can do by separating things and things like that, or when you got to go back to the producer or the musicians and go, hey, can we change this a little bit? Is that going to be messing with your thing, dude? Or, you know, can we do that? Because I can get much better sonic and clarity by doing it a little bit differently. So those are just some real simple examples. I could talk about this all day long, but I want to try to keep it real simple so that the end answer is you're taking those things into consideration as you're composing and as you're arranging, so that it's way more premeditated and the end product thought about, so that you are thinking about where everything's going to be in the spectral field and in the stereo field, and what is working together with harmonies and octaves, and where they be panned, how they're going to be working with each other, against each other, when some instrument's going to get just time to speak by themselves, the drum, and the bass, over there, you know, drums right in the middle, so everything is clear as a bell and heard distinctly. And when things are working together, that you've taken the spectral field into consideration, when you can keep things pretty close to each other, when you got to separate them so they sustain clarity, and when you don't want them, when you're trying to get that EDM sound, maybe you got that bass and that kick drum working together, bump, 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 you know, and they're just bump, 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 yeah, dude, you know, on your keyboard synth, you know, it's like, you know, it's way more premeditated, everything you do, thinking about the spectral balance, the sonic balance, and the sonic clarity of your production from the very beginning, and trying to see forward to what the end product's going to be, where everything's going to be at the end product. Your productions will come out having a much better sonic balance and a much better sonic clarity from you taking all these things into consideration. And when you go back to just thinking about basic sonic balance, that, hey, you know, I got a 4-piece band. I got the drum set, I got the bass, I got a guitar, I got a keyboard and a vocalist. That you really thinking about the sonic balance there. And when you can switch things up for a little change, you know, you might have the bass over there and the guitar over there, but you want to switch them up for this break or something that makes it sound different, but you're not really adding that much instrumentation. You just move things around a little bit. You're getting a different sonic balance that the listener is going to hear. And they might not hear a bunch of different instrumentation, but you've rearranged the sonic balance, still have great sonic balance and sonic clarity, but you move things around a little bit to, you know, make it sound like there's more going on than there isn't by you're rearranging the sonic balance. There's tons of little things like that you can do that are maintaining sonic balance and sonic clarity, but have different effects and make it sound like there's more going on than there isn't. And when you have few instrumentation, that it's very thought out about what's happening. Just be real careful that you don't get caught up and lost in sonic balance being, supportive of what's sitting on top, like an out front vocalist. Be real careful of that, because you want things clear and have good sonic balance of what's happening, but you don't sometimes want them to distract too much from what's happening with the out front vocalist or lead player or something like that. But there's a lot of space that you can have the vocalist, and then drums doing something, or the bass doing something, or the guitar saying something, and then I want something going on, everything having a chance to speak. That makes it a much more interesting production, rather than just having a supportive band underneath the vocalist that just constantly, and then I just go, I want to go, and then go, then I want to go, then I want to go, then I go. That's not giving anything else a chance to speak. Does that make sense? Which makes it a much more interesting. If he takes a break, steps back, let the bass speak for a minute, let the guitar speak for a minute, let the drum speak for a minute, let the keyboard say something, and then I want to go down to the boom bum, the road, jumping back and forth. Not only the sonic balance can help you there, but also letting just the left hand speak for a minute, or left right hand side speak for a minute. Let there be silence on their side for a minute. It sounds a little bit unbalanced, but if you got a bass goes boom, 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 and then the guitar goes tang over there just really quick, back to the it still maintains that sonic balance, because you're not throwing anything away. So you're still utilizing the majority of the spectrum. You're just not trying to muddy it all at the same time. Wall of sound with the whole band, ba 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 ba, with the singer, la la la, never shut up ever. Does that make sense? So those are all things you really need to consider, and it's the first place we have to really help us attain really good sonic balance and sonic clarity is in the creation, in the arrangement phase, as we're composing and working through our productions one moment at a time, seeing what is happening at every moment, and can see into the future where everything's going to be at the finished product. So peace, self love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this second video in our fourth master series on sonic balance and sonic clarity, dealing with it in the creation phase and the composition phase, and I will see you in the next video.